Three strikes, you're out. After Israel takes out two arms of the Iranian octopus, Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, the butcher of Damascus, Assad's regime in Syria, has fallen. Welcome to the Middle East jungle. Who will be the king of the jungle? Join me today on the Jordana River podcast. All right. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Jordana River podcast. I'm Jordana, and if you're new to the show, welcome. And if you've seen us before, welcome back. This is where we discuss current events in the beautiful land of Israel. And we take deep dives into the Jordana River commentary. That's mine. I took a little bit of a hiatus. It's really great to be back. And a little shout out to all my new subscribers, including a shout out to the new subscribers that are joining me from my dear sister's YouTube channel, Mrs. Tamar Meisel's YouTube channel. I really appreciate you guys' vote of confidence in me and support, and really nice to meet you all. All right, my friends, I hope you all are well. Today we got a lot to discuss. As the opening was, today we are going to discuss the Bashar Assad's regime in Syria that has fallen and all the consequences and possibilities and challenges of that situation. So first of all, today is Sunday, December 15th, 2024. As our routine, for those of you who don't know yet, we start with the beautiful olive groves in our backyard right here in the beautiful Syrian hills. Take a look at the olive groves. It's daytime. I finally made this video during daytime, so you get to see the olive groves. Take a look. All right, my friends, here are the beautiful olive groves, the olive trees here in the Syrian hills. And it is early afternoon here in Israel. You can see that truck, some cars going down on the road. And let's begin. All right, my friends, so let's begin. So this past Sunday, about a week ago, the Syrian regime has fallen. The regime of Bashar Assad, a cruel and brutal dictator who has ruled over Syria. Him and his father, whom he got the regime inherited to him by his father, Hafez al-Assad, which brought to an end a 54-year regime of the Assad family of Syria. The Syrian regime has fallen. It took only 2 weeks, even a bit less, 11 days, for Syrian rebels from different groups, which we'll get into in just a moment, took over the regime. First, they took over major cities in Syria, like Aleppo, which interestingly is a totally different name in Hebrew and in Arabic, Khaleb. Khaleb is Aleppo. And finally, they took over the capital city of the regime, Damascus. It took less than 2 weeks for it to fall. There's different reasons for that, which we'll also get into in a moment. Now, who are these rebel Syrian groups? So they're a mishmash of different terror groups, both Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which are known for being both brutally and extremely sadistic terror groups. And they are all different. Again, there's different factions of the rebel groups, but they're all headed by a leader named al-Jolani. Al-Jolani, does that sound familiar? Jolani is from the word Golan. Golan, the Golan Heights, which gives away, is very telling of his ambition to, unfortunately, he is not a lover of Zion. He's not an Israel lover. He wants to take over the Golan Heights, which are Israeli territories. So all these rebel groups are organized, backed, and funded by Turkey. Turkey is behind this rebellion. And Turkey, with their leader Erdogan, they have their own different agendas and ambitions. One of them is the Turkish leader Erdogan has neo-Ottoman Empire ambitions. Turkey was for 400 years an empire called the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over parts of the Middle East. And Erdogan is an Islamic fundamentalist leader who really, unfortunately, transformed Turkey, which is a member of NATO, into a really fundamentalist Islamic extreme country. And so he has backed this rebellion, which brought to the fall of the Assad regime. And so there's good news and bad news. And there's a lot of different possibilities that can unfold. But we know that it's all for the good. God is with us, and it all will be good. Please God. So the good news is that the Iranian-Shiite Axis of evil is crumbling. We'll get into that also just in a moment. And the bad news is that the Sunni axis of evil is rising. Yes, my friends, in the Middle East, it's very important for us to understand. It's very hard for us Westerners to wrap our heads around the idea, the notion, we're used to good guys fighting bad guys. Now, in the Middle East jungle, unfortunately, it's bad guys fighting bad guys. So remember, guys, there's two main Islamic religious denominations. I think I've mentioned this in previous videos. So we're going to get into like near history and then far history, and we're going to walk through and unpack what has happened here in Syria and the Middle East. So like we said, there's two main Muslim religious denominations. We have the Sunnis and the Shiites. After Muhammad, who was the founder of Islam and the so-called prophet, after he died, a big bitter feud broke out between the Sunni and the Shiite. The Shiite, I think, was considered the bastard son of Muhammad, if I'm not mistaken, and the Sunnis. The Sunnis hated the Shiites, and the Shiites hated the Sunnis. And ever since this happened, this feud broke out when Muhammad, the prophet, died back in the 14th century BC. There was also an inheritance feud between them, which really shows everyone should get their wills prepared. That's such a grim note. I'm sorry about that. But no, that's not the lesson here. So the Sunnis hate Shiites. Shiites hate the Sunnis for hundreds of years since. The Sunnis view the Shiites as heretics. We have to understand that in the Middle East and in Islam, all the battles, all the wars are religious based. Meaning in the Western world, we have different aspirations, different reasons that wars break out, whether it's territorial, monetary. In the Middle East, the different Arab denominations, Sunnis and Shiites, and also different tribes and clans, they fight each other for religious reasons. If they view each other as heretics, or someone isn't following Islam the way one faction wants them to, they are willing to kill and be killed in the name of Allah, in the name of God. They view it as a holy war called jihad. And it's very important. If us Westerners want to create peace, but true, lasting, real peace, not the bogus peace that they talk about on CNN, we first have to understand the Arab mind, the Muslim mind. So the wars are religious based, and the faction that wins the war or the battle, the religious war, he gets to rule over a certain region and a certain area of land. So it's religious and territorial as well. The territory will be ruled by whoever wins the religious war. So back to the Sunnis and Shiites. The Sunnis view the Shiites as the real heretics. Now, an offshoot of the Shiites, the bastard son, they're the heretics. An even more perverse version of them and offshoot of them are called the Alawites. Back to Syria. Alawites are considered a secular people of the offshoot of the Shiites, and to some Muslims, like the Sunnis, they don't even consider them real Muslims because they are secular and non-practicing. So they really need to be killed, according to the Sunnis. The Sunnis hate the Shiites, and if they hate the Shiites, then they hate the offshoot of the Alawites even more, and they need to be destroyed in the view of the Sunnis. Now, in Syria, the Alawites are a minority. They comprise of between 12 to 15% alone of Syria. That's a very small minority, yet they were the ruling class of Syria. The Bashar Assad regime was an Alawite secular regime that, even though they were a minority, they were the elite class who brutally ruled over the other majority and other minority groups and majority of Sunnis in the land of Syria. Before we get into exactly what they did, let's give a little preview of little background. Who was Bashar al-Assad? Bashar al-Assad was a cruel Alawite dictator who inherited the regime from his father, Hafez al-Assad, like we said. Now, Bashar, the son, he was an eye doctor. So he studied medicine in England. And, all the Western world was so impressed by this. I mean, the guy, he's studying medicine. He's going to become an eye doctor. He's learning in England because he loved the Beatles. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, guess who didn't love him? The 500,000 people that Bashar Assad slaughtered in Syria. So Bashar al-Assad, just because he had a nice suit and he studied medicine and he was clean shaven, he was not a moderate, okay? There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim in terms of religiously speaking. There could be very moderate, good people who are Arabs. That's besides the point. I'm talking about Muslim extremists. So Bashar al-Assad went back to Syria to rule after he became an eye doctor. And in 2011, during what was called the Arab Spring, it was an Arab uprising in all the different countries over the Middle East. Libya, all these Arab regimes fell into the hands of different rebel factions, including in Libya. And in Syria, there was a big attempt by Syrian rebels to take down Bashar Assad's regime during this Arab Spring. But Bashar al-Assad was able to survive. And how so? Well, my friends, two main reasons. He had two regional superpowers backing him and propping him up, and without them, he would not have survived the uprisings. One was Russia. Russia took over, was Bashar al-Assad's patron. Why? Well, of course, they have an interest. Russia's interest was they wanted access to the ports of the Mediterranean Ocean and gas. So they were using Bashar Assad to have access to the ports and the Mediterranean ports and gas. And so they helped Bashar Assad hold and maintain his regime while the Syrian rebels were really fighting hard by the Russian Air Force coming over there and bombing Syrian rebels. So they bombed and killed many Syrians just by the Russian Air Force helping Bashar Assad bomb them. Number 2 is Iran. Iran was the other regional superpower who helped Syria, and he helped Bashar Assad's regime stay in power by helping kill the rebels. They sent over their terror proxy, Hezbollah, and Hezbollah brutally massacred many Syrians. And so 500,000 Syrians were slaughtered, and very brutally, by Assad's regime, the Alawite secular regime, Russia bombing the heck out of them from the air, and Iran sending their proxy of Hezbollah to slaughter them and massacre them brutally. And Bashar Assad even used chemical weapons. It's important to mention this. He used chemical weapons and tortured many of his people. Now that the rebel factions liberated the jails in Syria, the jails of the Assad regime, I'm not going to get into graphic details, but it's just important to say that they, till they were liberated, till they were released by the rebels from the prisons, there is evidence of systematic, unbelievably unhuman torturing tactics. They had toddlers in these jails. They used chemical weapons, and they systematically also tried to make the prisoners, the ones they didn't kill, they tried to make them clinically insane, and so they would forget all the things that happened to them. Now, what is missing here in this picture? Oh, yeah, that's right. Maybe a UN condemnation, or ICC, the International Criminal Court, condemning this true genocide of Assad massacring his own people. 500,000 Arabs that he massacred. Nope, there was no condemnation. This was true genocide of his own people and ethnic cleansing, and there was no condemnations. No. Now, there were also 12 million Syrian refugees from this 2011 Arab Spring War. And over the course of about 6 to 7 years, 12 million Syrian refugees had to flee Syria. After 500,000 were killed, 12 million had to flee. Most of them fled to Europe and to Turkey, where there's a big immigration crisis in Europe. So Bashar al-Assad, he's known as the Butcher of Damascus, was no gentle moderate. Okay, now back to the current day rebellion. So about a week ago, the rebels took over Damascus, and Bashar Assad fled to Russia, where he is now taking asylum by their Russian patron. He took a plane. There was a lot of war fog, and people didn't know where he was. But in order to save his own life, him and his family's life, where they literally could have been beheaded, they fled to Russia, Moscow. Now, the genocide claim, by the way, the UN and ICC did not condemn this genocide. I think Barack Obama back in his day said something, but he didn't even help the Syrian people. They're not a Syrian people. There's no such thing. He did not help the different Syrian tribes and factions of the rebels against the chemical weapons that Assad used. So he didn't really do anything. So the situation got worse. 500,000 people were killed, 12 million refugees. Now, this current takeover, swift, rapid takeover, less than 2 weeks, the rebels in Syria took over Assad's regime, was also thanks to the fact that Russia, their main patron, couldn't help them. Russia's too bogged down in their Russia-Ukraine war. So they just basically, Russian troops folded and got the heck out of there, took their Russian warships and their whole navy and their air force, and they got out of Russia. And they also helped Bashar Assad and his family flee to Russia. And Iran, Syria's second patron, Assad Regime's second patron, who helped them back in 2011, was a no-show here too, an MIA, because Iran is too bogged down with having their proxies taken down by Israel, thankfully, and also Israel targeted and striked Iran twice so their capabilities are very limited, so they couldn't help either, and the Assad regime fell. And the third reason is really a dominoes effect, or cascade effect, if you will, but real domino effect by Israel significantly weakening the Hezbollah terror group, which operates in Lebanon, but they really helped the Assad regime. And Israel, about 2 months ago, started different operations that really struck the brutal Shiite organization of Hezbollah, who helped the Assad regime. And we took out a lot of the Hezbollah's capabilities. We had the beeper operation followed by the walkie-talkie operation. We destroyed a lot of their weaponry and ammunitions. And once the temporary ceasefire with Israel was signed between Hezbollah and Israel, it's really between Israel and Lebanon, because you can't really sign a peace treaty with a terror organization. The day that the ceasefire took place, with, of course, different violations by Hezbollah, that's when the Syrian rebels, they recognized their time. It was the right time for them to intervene, get in there, and they saw that the Assad regime didn't have nor Russia, nor Iran, nor Hezbollah, was extremely weakened. They went in within 2 weeks. They took over the Assad regime. Now, when I mention that there's no Syrian country, what do I mean? All right, guys, my friends, let's go back a little bit to further history. The Middle East was divvied up into artificial countries, artificial Arab countries, back in 1916, when the Sykes-Picot secret agreement took place. Let me just take a sip of my tea. So in 1916, towards the end of World War I, when the Turkish Ottoman Empire was falling, was collapsing and losing, Sykes and Picot, Sykes was a British diplomat and Picot was a French diplomat. When England and France saw that they were going to win and beat the Ottoman Turkish Empire, they secretly divvied up the Middle East into artificial countries. Okay, now you have to understand, the Middle East is big strip of land where there's many Arabs that live. Now, Arabs, they didn't have states. It wasn't like they had democratic, independent states before this Sykes-Picot agreement. So Sykes-Picot is a very important agreement to learn about and to understand. So that's why I would love to give a little overview. So once again, the Sykes-Picot divvied up the whole Middle East region and divided it into artificial Arab states. Before that, the Arabs were just, let's see if you remember, two main religious denominations, Sunnis and Shiites. The Sunnis, in parentheses, have an offshoot of the Alawites. But in general, Sunnis and Shiites, the Sunnis hate the Shiites hate the Sunnis. But in addition to that, the Arabs live in tribes. That's their mentality. It's very important for us Westerners to understand that. Because that is basically the only way of governing that works in the Middle East. Okay, the notion of implementing and establishing a democracy in the Arab countries is very, very challenging. It's almost not workable. The Arabs are used to living in, they have families, okay, they have tribes, they have clans. That is how now each clan takes care of themselves, and that's how they rule over each other. And they have a lot of civil fighting between the clans and between the tribes, and between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and the Shiites and the Sunnis. Now, Sykes-Picot artificially divided up the countries into what they called Lebanon. Okay, Lebanon is on the north of Israel. They also divided up a land called Syria. There was no democratic state of the Syrian people. There was no Lebanese people. They were just Arab tribes of different religious denominations and also different ethnic groups. Okay, the Arabs, you also have Druze minority, you have Kurdish minority, and you have some Christian Arabs who are a true minority. So Lebanon became a state on the northeast of Israel. Syria became an Arab state, which is the northeast, and Lebanon northwest of Israel, Israel's border. They also divided up Iraq and Jordan, which they call Jordan because it's on the east side of the Jordan River. Hence the name of our podcast, Jordan River. Now, they called Jordan. Whatever was on the east of the Jordan River was Jordan, or the British called it Transjordan. And what was on the west of the Jordan River was Palestine. Does that ring a bell, that name? Palestine. So Palestine, for the British Empire, when they divvied it up in Sykes-Picot Agreement, they called the western side of the Jordan River, which flows all across the border. Palestine was a mishmash of whoever lived in the eastern side of the Jordan River, mainly the Jews. So this is a little fact checking. Palestine was a made-up artificial term by the British Empire, and an Arab lie that continues which they continue to propagate till this day. Why is it a lie? There is no such thing as the Palestinian people. Once again, the British coined that term of Palestine, whoever lived on the eastern side of the Jordan River, during the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Now, there were about, if I'm not mistaken, about 100,000 Jews living in that area before 1948. Who originally coined the term Palestina? It was actually the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire was trying to oppress and repel the Jewish people living in Israel from rising up and rebelling against them, they called Jerusalem and the Judea and Samaria, they called it Palestina, in order to make the Jews forget that it's our homeland. So the Roman Empire called it Palestina, the Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria territory. And then the British Empire, back to Sykes-Picot Agreement 1916, the British, Sykes and Picot, the Frenchy, they divvied up and called it Palestine. Now, even if one doesn't believe in the Bible, one must believe in history. The history shows that there was a Jewish homeland going back thousands of years. So we had kingdoms. Why is it called Judea and Samaria? We had our kingdom that was the capital of our kingdom of the Judah tribe. The Judah tribe of Israel was the tribe of the kings. And we have had kingdoms in the land of Israel, our homeland, with King David, King Solomon, and after him, many, many, many kings, which when the Roman Empire, unfortunately, took over and expelled us from our land, and the Jews went into exile for 2,000 years. Now, over those 2,000 years, there were two miracles regarding the land of Israel that God made. One is that the land of Israel stayed desolate for 2,000 years, meaning when Jews were exiled and don't live on their own land, no other people can produce agriculture in the land of Israel. Mark Twain even wrote about that on his journey through the land of Israel back in the late 1800s, I believe. And he wrote about how the land of Israel is so desolate, meaning, just because the Jews don't live there, how come there's no agriculture? And there was, besides that, it was desolate, and there was malaria, there were diseases. No other people could produce anything from the land. The land stayed loyal to the Jewish people. When the Jewish people was absent from the land of Israel did not produce any agriculture. And the second miracle is when the Jews came back, the land started to flourish again. So there were always some Jews that lived in Israel, but it wasn't even since the exile 2,000 years ago. But we did not establish our own government. But there were always Jews that lived there throughout history in the land of Israel. But when there were massive pilgrimage back to the land of Israel by Jews from Europe in the mid-1800s, so in about 1850s or so, the first waves of aliyah, of pilgrimage back to Israel, took place. And the Jews came back to Israel and they settled the land and they dried up the swamps, and there was malaria still, but they settled the land and produced beautiful agriculture. That's the double miracle, that the land stayed desolate when Jews weren't there, and yet they once the Jews came back en masse, they really produced and flourished the land. So in the 1920s, there was a big Jewish community coming back to Israel, as God had promised us to return to our land after our exile, and it was happening. That's when the Arabs sorry about that. So back in the 1850s, that's when massive pilgrimage Jewish settlers came back to the land of Israel. In the early 1900s, when the Jews produced good agriculture, a lot of Arabs from neighboring areas, from Iraq and the bordering areas with what was called Palestine, coined by the British Empire, they started moving to Israel because of the employment possibilities and the agriculture flourishing. But once again, the whole idea of Palestinian people is a lie. Palestine was first coined by the Roman Empire, which they called Palestine, in order to make Jews forget about their homeland. And it was nicknamed for Jerusalem and the Judea and Samaria territories. And then the British Empire called Palestine the eastern side of the Jordan River. Basically, the Jews are the indigenous people in the land of Israel. We're the indigenous. For the woke people out there, they have to learn history, because the real colonialists were Sykes-Picot, were the British and French empires who divvied up the Middle East when it wasn't their area to divide up. They were the true colonialists, right? The wokes, they're very anti-colonialists, and they blame Israel for being colonialist. No, it's actually the opposite, guys. This is our homeland. We're the indigenous people who also lived here throughout the 2,000 years, and especially from the mid-1800s. And the colonialist Europeans came and told us what to do, divvied up the country into artificial Arab states, which did not work because Muslims cannot have democracies. They live in tribes, Sunnis, Shiites, tribes, clans, and the colonialists really had agendas, which was they wanted to have the pipeline of gas from the Middle East to Europe. So the main colonialist aspiration was money, power. They wanted the pipeline of gas. So we're the indigenous people, guys. So that was a little tangent about Palestine. So Syria is an artificial name to an Arab land, an Arab region, made up of a mishmash of different Arab ethnicities, Sunnis and Shiites and Alawites. So too, as the term Palestine was a made-up term by the Brits, the British Empire. There's no such thing as Palestinian people. The Arabs today like to say they're Palestinian people. Guys, remember, it's the Sykes-Picot agreement. There's no Palestinian anthem and Palestinian cuisine that dates back hundreds of years. No. There's no such thing. And there's no such thing as Palestinian culture. It's made up. There's an Arab people, there's Arab peoples and Arab tribes and Arab Muslims. Syria, by the way, I read somewhere that Syria is actually named Syria, mispronounced from the Greek word Assyria, which is an ancient people, Ashur in the Bible, Assyria. By the way, a little fun fact about Palestine. One little tiny fact that could prove the whole lie, the whole myth, and debunk the whole myth of Palestinian Arab people. Guys, Palestinian, it's with a P, right? The Arabs cannot inherently pronounce P. So that's like an ironic thing. If it's their homeland and their ancient culture, they cannot really pronounce it. They can say an F, the letter of F. So they can say Palestine, but they cannot pronounce the original Roman Empire word of Palestina. That's with a P. So I don't know what people would make up a name of a country for themselves that they can't pronounce. So if anyone out there is debating a woke, telling us that the Jews are the colonialists in Israel and the Arabs are the indigenous people, ask them if the Arabs can pronounce Palestine. No, they can say Palestine, they can say different variations, but not Palestine. Can't say it well. So back to Syria. So there are three different... So the coalition of rebels they're not good people. They're not the good guys, right? Remember we said bad guys fighting bad guys. That's the Middle East jungle. The coalition of rebels consists of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, very notoriously known for being very brutal extremist Muslims. And like we said, their leader is called al-Jolani, which is Golan, the Golan Heights. His aspiration is also to fight against Israel because everybody hates the Jews. Not everybody, not you, my good people. My friends, there are three other ethnicities, minorities in Syria who are relatively friendlier to the West. And Israel might be reaching out to them because Israel, as opposed to what they say about us in the UN, that we're genocidal and we're an apartheid state and such, we're actually very, very pluralistic and liberal and open. And Israel is becoming a regional superpower by the grace of God. We are destroying the Iranian proxies. And there are three minority groups in Syria whom are friendlier, and they are the following. The Christian Arabs, a true minority in the Syrian land. Druze, who are mostly based in southern Syria, which is on the northern border of Israel. And the Kurds, the Kurdish people. They're an ethnic Arab group whom the Turks hate. So we said this whole rebellion against the Assad regime, hope you're following this, pretty confusing, is backed by the Turkish leader Erdogan. One of his reasons for invading and Syria and helping the rebels take over Assad's regime is because they hate the Kurds and they want to kill them. Now, so Israel might be reaching out to any or all of those groups in order to create alliances, assistance. Israel has already established connections with the Druze community, both in South Syria and Northern Israel. We have Druze Arabs, Arab Israelis, who live in the communities in the north of Israel. If you guys remember back in the summertime, August or September or so, I don't remember exactly, there was the Hezbollah shot a missile which killed Druze Israeli Arabs in the community, in the Druze community of Majd al-Shams, which means Tower of Sun, Majd al-Shams. So we have connections with the Druze, and the Druze are also requesting that Israel annex them or protect them, give them our assistance, because the rebels are very brutal and violent, and they know what they're capable of, and these rebels are coming for them. So what happened in the past few days? Our Air Force, our Israeli Air Force, recognizing the danger of these Syrian rebels, they're mostly Sunni denomination rebels, we decided to have a large-scale preemptive strike after October 7th, after what happened to us, the brutal, atrocious massacres, the worst massacres since the Holocaust for the Jewish people. October 7th, 2023, when Hamas in the south invaded our Israeli communities, slaughtered 1,200 Jews and Israelis, beheaded and killed babies, women, raped many women, and slaughtered babies, put them in ovens, burned people alive. When Hamas, so Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north were both proxies of Iran. And since October 7th, Israel has systematically taken out and weakened and demolished Hamas in the south and severely weakened Hezbollah in the north. Those are two major Iranian proxies. Iranian are Shiites. So we said Sunnis and Shiites hate each other. Iran is the Shiite axis of evil. So once Israel took out Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, and now Syria's is Iran's third proxy, which fell in the hands of the Sunni rebels. The Iranian axis of evil is crumbling before our eyes, which is a very good thing. It has a lot of opportunities and possibilities. We just have, Israel is very sobered up, and we still don't rely on the extremist Sunnis rebels who are rising up. Again, they're Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They're not friendly people. And they were right there on our border, on the northeast border of Israel over here. Lebanon is over here. So they were camping out on our border, and Israel decided to launch a preemptive large-scale strike where we basically demolished and decimated the entire Syrian, Assad regime's Syrian army's navy, utilities, Air Force. We knocked out, I don't know, they say about like 80% of the Assad regime's Syrian army, which could have fell into the hands of the extremist Sunni rebels. And we do not want these sensitive warfare utilities to get into the hands of the Sunni rebels, especially not chemical weapons. So we knocked out from the air with, I think, almost zero casualties, by the way. That just shows how surgical and precise the Israeli army is. We have no intention of killing people. We just want to protect our borders and our people, and even the people that we want to help protect, like the Druze and the Kurds, whom we also might reach out to. We are a kind superpower. We are a merciful and kind regional superpower that's emerging, and we decided to take out Assad's army, which is very good news. Very, very, the world is safer, the Middle East is safer. I just wanted to show you guys a little illustration of what Israel has done. So Israel's our northeast border is with Syria. And here we have the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights was captured in 1967 in the Six-Day War because the Syrians used the Golan Heights to shell Israelis constantly and killed a lot of Israelis for many years until the 1967 war, where we captured the Golan Heights, beautiful area, and the Hermon, the Mount of Hermon, the Israeli Hermon area, right near the Golan Heights, where it's a snow. They have snow there in the winter, and it's a beautiful ski resort. Now, right above it is this what's known as the Syrian Hermon. Now, the rebels were coming close to that border. That's when the Israeli government decided to give order to our Air Force and our army to take over this buffer land and to take over the Syrian Mount Hermon. So we have the Israeli Hermon Mountain and the Golan Heights and the Syrian Hermon Mountain. We took over it. There's beautiful pictures of Israeli soldiers in that area. You have to understand, we're in historical times in the 67 war and also in the Yom Kippur War of 73. Unfortunately, there were a lot of Israeli soldier casualties. A lot of soldiers were killed trying to conquer the Israeli Mount Hermon. And now, within a few days, we took over without any casualties, thank God. We took over the Syrian Hermon in order to protect our land and our people. We do not want another October 7th, God forbid 1,000 times, to ever even fathom that it could happen again. So we took preemptive strikes and eliminated the threats. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities. Here's my son's snow globe of the Hermon. Take a look. All right, my friends. So here is my son's Mount Hermon snow globe. Let's shake it off a little bit. So Israel captured the northern Syrian Hermon part. There you see the snow. And here is an illustration of an Israeli paratrooper coming down and thankfully taking over the beautiful Mount Hermon. That, of course, is not how it took place. It was not paratroopers that took over the Hermon this time. That was in the 67 war, 1967, Six-Day War. Yeah, so that was my little illustration. So my friends, as we see, we are in historical times. It's a new day, a new era in the Middle East. The Middle East is reshaping. Do not be discouraged that the Shiite Axis of evil, which included Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north, Syria on our northeast border, all backed and organized by the head of the octopus of Iran, is crumbling. And Israel is becoming the victor, the triumphant one. Who would have believed a year and 2 months ago we had the most atrocious massacre on our people since the Holocaust, and Israel has been fighting a 7-front war for the past year and 2 months and continues to fight. But we are sobered up. We are fighting for our homeland. We are not giving in. We are very determined and initiating, and it opens up a lot of different opportunities. Do not be discouraged that the Shiite axis is falling and the Sunni axis of evil is rising, because as long as, first of all, God is with us, God is moving our world to a better place. And as long as Israel is following what's happening and we can create true peace in this land. And for those of you out there, Jews, Gentiles, Christians, good people of the world, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support. Means a lot to me. And if you like this content and you're new to the show, please feel free to subscribe. And I wish you all a wonderful week with good news. Hope you all are doing well. Shalom, shalom. All the best. Bye for now.